the video that I use as my YouTube header is the one that I once did a Twitter AMA where I asked people to ask me questions. And I think it might have been Liminal or someone else who said like top 10 things that you've unlearned. There's one question, somebody else asked like top 10 life hacks.
Yeah.
And like in both of those cases, the fact that I had to squish that into 2 minutes, and I wanted right. So I think I had like my number 2 is like marry young, and number 1 is like accept defeat, and then I'll explain each of those things in like 2 sentences. But to like do that quickly, I mean to 10 things you can list out in like 30 seconds ish. But if you want to make sure that you include the details, that takes a bit longer.
Yep.
And so I like typed it out in a notepad, and then I read it out as quickly as I could, and it was like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's so dense.
And that's why you have it as the
it's
thing.
so great. Yeah, so most of my videos are longer, but they have me thinking, and you see me going through my stuff.
Yeah.
But like when it's dense, and I really like, I think Lin-Manuel Miranda said this about writing Hamilton. He said that he tried to kick the tires of the verses. So he would say something in 4 lines, and then be like, how do I say it in 2? How do I say it in 1?
Yeah.
And it's like you try to just squeeze in, and it's challenging. And then when you do that, it's just, then the line becomes unfuckwittable, he says. It's like, you find that to do that, you can't just use the vocabulary, you also have to mess with the cadence and because the rhythm has to flow, or it doesn't go that tight.
Yeah.
And it's just...
Yeah.
So I do think eventually I'll want to do something that's like taking my longer videos and then try to remake the same video in like half the time or like a third of the time.
There's an exercise for this that I actually saw. I heard about it from some Seafair people actually, and we did a little demo of it. And you basically you take a thing and you start small. Actually, there's a version where you start big and you go small. There's also a version where you start small and go big. And so, like, you can go around in a circle, and the first person, so it's like tell a story, and the first person goes, a dog went to the store, and the second person goes, there was a dog that was wandering around trying to figure out where he wanted to go, and he decided that he would check out the corner store. And then the third person goes, one day, Mr. Whatever Dog was trying to figure out what to do, and like sort of one sentence, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, and what part of the principle was that this was somehow related to how like people in sort of oral cultures would tell stories. Right? It's like the story would be embellished by the storyteller. There'd be many different versions. They'd all hit kind of the same plot points, but it was the skill of just adding juicy details, and my dog's store was like not that interesting.
Sure, but like and eventually I get it now. Like so, and eventually that has a remix culture into it, right? Because if somebody else had like a twist or a variation that was sticky, then people like, hey, tell me about that one. Like that guy told me about that, and I'm like, oh, okay, like that. Even just when you see it, the audience goes, oh, like, oh, I'm keeping that one.
Exactly.
Over time, it gets just more and more better. And it's audience fit, I guess.
But the skill of distilling is also really good. It's like, okay, and this is something I need to practice more too. It's like take take what I'm trying to say in this post and say it in a paragraph. Take the paragraph and say it in a sentence. And I get so resentful at that. I'm like, but it's all important. You can't like, but if you see it not as trying to replace the thing. Although sometimes functionally it will. The person's not going to read the whole thing. But if instead of trying to replace it, it's more like trying to, and it's not even quite trying to summarize. I like distill. It's like when you distill, it's like the water's gone. But it's not the same anymore. But like it sometimes might be too strong to drink. Like it's too stiff. Right?
You know that it's become more potent in some ways that might not be what you want, but it gives you something else that you can work with in a different context. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Right, and you were talking about this earlier with respect to like, shortening your you have these phrases like focus your time and energy on what you want to see more of, and then it's like having said that enough time, you can just sort of riff on it as like focus on what you want, and people will sort of know.
I can just say focus. The Visa focus tweet.
Exactly. Like, come on, guys, focus. Like, I think if you said that, especially in context where like people were like bitching about something they didn't want, you're like, come on, guys, focus. And like, focus your time.
And I think in the most extreme cases, if like the setup is clear enough, like somebody says, what should I focus on? I can just reply with like the eyes emoji, or like just any like like a question.
Right.
And people would fill in the blanks. Oh, what would Visa say? Oh, right. Of course, the same thing, right? Like so, like Patio 11, he always tells people to charge more in everything. So it's like if somebody's like, oh, my business is not doing so well, what should I do? He could just reply with like a smiley face, and people are like, oh yeah, he would say charge more. Like, You commit to the bid so much, people know what to expect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like a thing that you might do is like if you saw somebody be like, my business, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. Just like at Patio 11,
right.
And then some third person comes in and says, in other words, charge more. Like he doesn't have to even show up. It's like his perspective.
The meme has preceded him. Yeah, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing I wanted to get to about like compressing and distilling and expanding and compressing is like, well, one is that it's hard. It's you. So like I have a bunch of Twitter threads that I try to make essays out of. Because Twitter threads come very naturally to me, and I can
likewise.
But like writing an essay, actually, I'd love to hear for you how the difference between the two is. Because for me, like I can't take a thread and copy paste it into like a document and then like try to just tweak it a little bit to make it an essay.
I found I can do that pretty well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it takes like I was actually on the plane to Singapore before my laptop battery died. I was working on like remixing a thread I have that's like what is coercion. I was like remixing that into a blog post.
Right.
But
do you do it with the source thread? Like
I literally like pasted in. But in this particular case, part of what happened was I started going through it, and literally like I was like, oh man, okay, but I want to explain this thing. And then I was like, fuck, I'm not ready to post this. I'm having new insights that I now haven't. I haven't integrated enough to feel satisfied with what I did write. Like prior to starting editing it, I would have been like, I could just put this live basically as it is. Capitalize the sentences rather than leaving them lowercase or whatever, put some punctuation, but like just put the thread approximately live. Okay. But then I was like, oh fuck, I now slightly disagree with what I said earlier. I've got more damn it. And that's like one of the things that happens to me when I try editing. But like, that's a good problem to have. It's like I'm getting more clarity. And ultimately, like I don't need to be publishing on any particular schedule. But it's still annoying. It's like I was like set out to write something to publish it.
I definitely encountered that a bunch of times while working on my book, and so there were some things where I'm like, okay, the book is teaching me that the thread was an early version of something that's more nuanced and more complex. Sometimes even like directly contradicting the previous thing. And I ended up with like I had to start making to finish the book without being like everything's incomplete. Mm-hmm. I started opening up like this list, and I included the list at the end of the book. It's like here are all the things that I wanted to get into more deeply in the book that like. So they're all like starting points for further inquiry. So like earlier when I talked about sovereignty, I didn't talk about this, or like I wanted to get more into that, or if you consider this in light of that.
I think that's good to do for blog posts as well. I don't do it much, but like I'm like, oh yeah, that would help me. And sometimes I will keep like one thing I don't like deleting text.
Right.
So I'll like I'll have my draft or whatever, especially if it's in like Google Docs or something like that, and then I'll make a horizontal line, and then I'll be like scraps. And I'll just like I'll just like take a paragraph that I've decided to remove and just paste it down there. Right. And that way it's sort of still there, and maybe it gets remixed back into a different section later or something, or sparks some other thing or whatever.
Yeah, I do have that as well. I have scraps. Yeah, similar. I think I have a note that's like deleted, but it's not actually deleted because I'm copying it out. Right? But it's like just junk or like back in the folders, scraps, whatever. It's just because you never know. There's every. Even a paragraph that was written that was like an exploratory paragraph that turns out to not be necessary for the later point. There's like something in there sometimes that you can see that you might just leave it there in your drawer or something. Yeah. And then one day you're scrolling through it or whatever and just catches something. It's pretty interesting. So for me, I find the challenge when I'm putting the text on the page is that I feel like the rhythm of tweets and the rhythm of maybe I'm like oversensitive to this, but like the rhythm of tweets feels different from the rhythm of like longer form writing.
It does, yeah. But I mean, I think one way to treat this is like, okay, expand each tweet into a paragraph, right? And just sort of like, and then just practice the expanding thing. Expand 100 tweets, right? Say, okay, this tweet is now going to be a paragraph, right? And so it's like say the same thing that the tweet says, but in a paragraph instead of a tweet. That's maybe the way to do it.
Yeah, my approach is really I read it a couple of times and then I try not to look at it. And try to just freestyle from scratch as quickly as I can.
Nice.
And
yeah, that seems like that would be fun too.
Challenges me to. Oh, I don't even think about it.
You get fresh language at that point, and
yeah,
you get like new phrasings, and you probably get some cool distillations that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Correct. But like sometimes there is like something very specific about the way a phrase ends a tweet or something. And you try to when I try to put it in an essay, it doesn't quite hit the same. Like there's almost like there's a sweet spot to end a specific tweet that almost I feel like for me I can't quite recreate the magic in the same way.
Yeah.
But I like that. I like that it feels like different mediums have different kinds of artistry to it.
Yeah.
Like so it's like you might make a great TikTok or something, and it's like the constraints of the frame of the TikTok. It's like because you're seeing the person moving in and out of the frame, but you try and do that on like a cinema movie, and it's like it doesn't feel the same. Like it might be you might want to try and use the same principle somehow, but like you then find yourself asking like, oh, what is the audience experiencing? What are their expectations? How are they reading this? What does it feel? Blah blah blah, and it's something that I can like aim all this on the other end, but none of that actually matters. So just think about what you care about.
One of the things that inspired me at one point was, and maybe not even at one point, but like a couple times I've thought back to this, is like your like 1 a.m. can't sleep, time to do a fresh reboot. Maybe it's 4 a.m.
Some of my best.
Yeah, trying to do a fresh reboot of Visa's Talking Points, right?
Yeah.
And there was something about like in general, one of the ways that you've inspired me is like it's like oh, you said a thing before, just say it again.
Right.
You'll say it differently this time. And like just sort of don't worry about not repeating yourself. It's like because you almost can't help but remixing yourself anyway.
I actually that's wonderful. Thank you so much, first of all. And I also do feel like I do actually still worry about repeating myself somewhat.
Yeah.
And I guess I try to be so like with the reboot, like I guess I found myself a deliberate structure that made me feel confident in my remixing. I'm like, okay, fresh slate, let's try this again.
Right? Yeah. And then that frame gave you the sort of creative license to be utterly repetitive.
Right.
It's like you sort of didn't have to worry about that at all. Yeah. But like you're not gonna, it'd be weird if it would probably be weird. I think if every week you were like reboot Visa, that'd just be too often of a cadence.
Yeah. So there's a sweet spot of rebooting, and that reminds me also of like, I have like this playlist of videos that move me emotionally, and like there's so one of it is like the StarCraft Legacy of the Void, just the teaser animation. It just shows a bunch of like StarCraft Protoss people defending their homeland. It's like just a fictional little like cutscene, but like I get emotional when I watch it. And then like I can rewatch it and I still feel a bit moved. By my third rewatch, I'm not really feeling it anymore. I'm just like it's like there's an emotional swelling in my heart.
Yeah.
And it feels like I have to forget about it before and then think about it a new time and then I can swell it again. Same for like rewatching The Lord of the Rings like once a year. Like I feel like there's a tradition that seems to be if I watch it once a year I get really roused up. But if I try watching it like once a month, like the second time, why am I watching this again? I just saw it last month. Like, there seems to be some kind of accumulation and discharge thing.
Yeah.
And so same as this, I think for rebooting and Talking Point, or even like, when I shipped each of my books, I couldn't face. I was so because I'm looking at the same manuscript every day for like a year, or for introspect it was like 2 years, and it took me maybe 3 to 6 months ish before I like. First of all, stop thinking about it. Like I kind of released the material from like my
but you still have this background like, oh, this is related to that chapter, I could work that in, and you're like, I'm not going to do that this week.
It takes a while for it to like drop from recent memory or like I don't know if it's like RAM or what the analogy is, but like there's like recent working memory. It takes a while to drop. Even when I left my job, I was working for 5 years, and like after I left my job, I think for the first month or so, like it felt like the stuff was slowly leaving my working memory. Like all the stuff that I was. I mean, even now, if you ask me about specifics, like, I guess I can remember some stuff, a bunch of stuff, but like, there was a very heightened working memory thing. And now I remember, I do have a tweet about it. I said, sometimes when I say I've been thinking about this a long time, what it actually is, it's not even like I'm thinking about it actively, but at some point, I had an elaborate thought lattice, and then in giving it time to degrade, like the thought lattice in my mind degrade. So initially, maybe there's like 7 things, and then like, it's like survival of the fittest, right? Like the things that I forget, I get forgotten. And then the last 2 remaining things, those were the strongest. Yeah. And so I recreate the thing with those two as starting points, and it's way better now. And it's like.
Have you ever lost an essay that you wrote? Like
yes, so many times.
And then you go to rewrite it, and you're like, this is better than it was the first time.
Yeah, it do be
but it's like, it would be so hard. Like I would find it so hard to write V1 and then intentionally delete it, and know that I was going to do that when I wrote it. I'd be like, no, but like when you lose it, for whatever reason, it's sort of like you're like fuck, and then you're like, well, here I go. And
I definitely did that a bunch of times with my book because it just got kind of stilted. Like I'm trying to say so much and I get stilted in the middle. But then I just get frustrated and I'm open a new doc and I'm like, I go into like this fire. Like, all right, I'm gonna start the whole thing all over again. Let's fucking go. Let's go right now. And then you can't do that for a whole book, so you get kind of burnt out in the middle. But like,
and then you're like, oh, okay, let's remix the other parts.
That process is great. Like it really is. There's some element of desperation, some element of doing the impossible, some element of, but like, I don't know if everyone is gonna feel the same way, but like. It's worked well enough for me that I'm pretty sure it's going to be a part of my creative repertoire for the rest of my life. I'm just
that's a move. Yeah.
From time to time, I'm like, just basically point at someone and be like, tell me everything you know about religion in 5 minutes, and like timer starts now, and then you're like, or whatever. It's just that these constraints they really challenge you to, and I've always found that like the best phrasing, it's like. You don't get great phrasing by trying to get great phrasing because you're looking for greatness and you don't see it. Greatness it's like this back alley shortcut you took by accident because you're like, oh that route is jammed, fuck, let's just go this way. And you come out and say, that we actually found a shorter route. But like you weren't looking for it because it's not obvious. It's kind of like a desperation maneuver.
And the thing about how also like greatness is revealed by what stays.
Yes.
It's like, maybe it was you. Somebody was recently had a thread about how Ed Sheeran and then somebody in a different industry that was like consistently producing bangers, like hits and stuff. And they're like, how do they do it?
They produce all the time.
Right, and it was something about just keep producing, right?
And people forget the not good ones. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I had this thing that was actually similar to the degrading lattice that you pointed at, where some of my songs at one point. I still do this sometimes anyway. That's a whole other story. But I've written songs in a few different ways. Like one is like song idea comes, grab a piece of paper and a pencil and just write it down, and just but within an hour all the lyrics are there. Like maybe I edit them later, but like they were finished within an hour, like done. Okay. But then some other times I've also written songs like just walking around and just singing and just kind of going over and over. And when I've done that, like sometimes I've made recordings on my phone or whatever, but other times I literally just keep it in memory, and the parts I forget must not have been that good.
Yeah,
is sort of the attitude I'm taking. So I'm like, I totally had part of a second verse.
Yeah.
Well, guess it wasn't that good. New second verse, or like, oh, there was a line there. Well, whatever.
Sometimes it'll come back. So tweeting a lot has really taught me that good ideas come back. And like it's given me so much relief, and so I'm willing to share it with other people. I mean, I don't know if it's true for everyone, but it can't be true just for me, right? So it's like there have been essays that I've been trying to work on, or just I don't know if that's too strong to a framing of essays, but like you just tweet about random shit for like 5 years straight as voluminously as you can, and you find that you can't help but return to the same patterns and you make the same observations. Like if it's good, it'll come back because it's good, and so you'll encounter some random trigger in the environment. And again, so in both cases, what you learn is that randomness isn't really random, or like what feels like randomness in human life. Is it follows similar patterns. It follows like you get triggered by the same things, you get frustrated by the same things, and
you notice the same kinds of things. Like you in particular, like it wouldn't come back to somebody else,
right?
But because it never came to them in the first place.
Yeah. And once something comes to you like 3 times, then you know that, oh man, this has to. And like the third time, like and especially on Twitter, you can search for your own stuff. Like so being able to search your own stuff
and how modular it all is.
Right.
I also, going back to the earlier thing about like the difference between, like you said something about essays. Like, is that essay the right thing to call it? But it's like one way that I would say an essay feels different to me than a little bit than like a thread is like with a thread, I often like. I'm thinking like one tweet ahead.
Same.
Right? Like I really don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm just like, okay, here's a thought. Here's the next thought. Here's another next thought. And sometimes like I'll be like, oh, here's 2 next thoughts. Well, we'll bloop. But like with an essay, I more have this feeling like I have a thesis.
Right.
Let me attempt to explain that thesis. And sometimes I'll end up making a tangent anyway that I either will or won't include in the post. And sometimes in the course of writing, I end up rediscovering what I was trying to say, and I end up going, I actually don't agree with myself anymore. I actually have to come at this from a whole different angle. But there's still I can still, but the point is, like, with an essay, I know when I start writing it, what I'm hoping to achieve with it. Like, I want you to understand this concept. I want you to just, like, see how this is important. I want you to, like, whatever. But, like, whereas with a Twitter thread, I'm like, oh, there's some nugget of a thing here. Let me, like, pull on it and see what comes out. So that feels like kind of the difference.
Agreed.
I wonder if that I wonder if that's related to why it feels weird to try to turn a thread into an essay, though, because that's different than the cadence of the text itself.
I mean, it also depends on, like, kind of what your expectations for the essay are. So, like, I would say that when I was started writing as a teenager, like, I used to blog, and what's the difference between a blog post and an essay? That's like semantics, right? But, like, so I would say that I started out writing essays, sort of, but they were very much, like, the etymology of it, like, it's like French for, like, an attempt. I made a lot of attempts, right? and they were, they were all right for attempts. Like, they went, some of them were pretty interesting and whatever. But yeah, then after going from writing a bunch of those kind of, like, loosely considered casual-ish essays with no real plan in mind, or I'm just trying to, like, riff off a simple idea. Now that I've done so many threads and I've written 2 books, and I want to go back full circle to writing essays again, I have much higher standards for what I want out of my essays than what I used to. Because I've already written hundreds of, like, let's see what Visa thinks essays. And I can make even this video, so let's just see what Visa thinks. Like, I have so many volumes and volumes of what does Visa think, let's see. But, like, with essays, well, there is still some of that. If an essay doesn't have any of that whatsoever, I think it's kind of dead. But like, I want it to be kind of concerted. I wanted to challenge myself and challenge the reader. I want to be like, so it's like, what I kind of do is I basically write and draft an essay, and then I look at the draft of the essay and I'm like, is this challenging? And not necessarily, like, difficult to read, but, like, is it presenting ideas or presenting vibes or feelings or whatever that will be kind of consequential idea-wise? And what I found is that as I go through my drafts, it's like a lot of my, so I'm very proud of my first essay, which was called, on my Substack, which is called We Were Voyagers. And within that main essay, there's, like, I have a subheader that's like rhizomatic trade routes of knowledge. I have another subheader that's like make status games glorious again. And in a way, each of those are like sub-essays with ideas being explored. And all of those sub-essays add up to a coherent picture of we were voyagers and we will voyage again. And let's have a historical sense of whatever. And I quote Nietzsche. And it's like, so it's like there's that synthesis of those like 5 or 6 different things that come together. And I feel so, I know when I've done it. And again, like if I could
there's an art of it.
Yes.
It's like, I mean, in some ways it feels a little bit like some of my blog posts feel like songs I've written.
Actually, I was just gonna go there.
Some of them feel more like freestyles.
Right. Yes.
Like they don't really feel finished or coherent.
Correct.
Like, but like when the thing gets really coherent, it's like even if you wrote it from start to end, as opposed, there's almost still a way in which like it's calling back and it's like it's a whole. It has a kind of wholeness.
Yeah. Okay, I love this. Yeah. So similarly, I feel like a lot of my essay ideas, it's like, okay, so imagine like you're recording just sessions of practice or like freestyling or whatever. And like, I have a lot of riffs, I have a lot of lyrics, I have a lot of, like, oh, here's a chord progression for a chorus, maybe here's this thing. But for when the song comes together, it forms this whole that's greater than any of its parts.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the song will tell you what it wants to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I have a bunch of essays that are trying to figure out who they are, and like trying to figure out what it is they have to say. And it's delightful, like it's challenging and frustrating and annoying, but I know that just as when I get a tweet, right? Instead, I really enjoyed QC's latest tweet about empaths, when he was saying that everyone's an empath, but self-declared empaths are kind of refusing to see that everyone, like, so a lot of people project that they don't really want to be read, and self-declared empaths kind of bulldoze through that, and they don't really either
the ones who are sort of reading people anyway.
Yeah, either they can't see it or they won't see it. And like that was a fucking banger of it. That's so my retelling of that tweet was so much less artful than the tweet itself.
Yeah.
The tweet was one tweet, And I talked about it like 3 tweets worth of rambling, trying to recall, right?
Yeah.
And that's an example of, I feel, like you could not have written that tweet like off the cuff without having thought about these things for a long time. Right? That's the process of a mind that has been chewing on a problem for a long time, and then you just see that there's so much that you can squish into one place. It goes back to Lin-Manuel's folding in an unfuckwithable thing, right? And to try and do that with essays, like you could kind of publish an essay that's just, I was thinking about these things, but if you can find like the elegant path through the whole thing, like I believe that it transcends bandwidth limitations. So people have readers have limitations, and listeners have limitations as to like how much information they can consume in a given amount of space. And if you surpass their bandwidth expectations and you convey more signal than they expected to see, then they're like, holy shit, oh my god, let me read that again. What the fuck? Like that was so engaging and
it's a kind of like density quality.
Yeah. It's like a tungsten cube. It's like, whoa, that's heavier than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you have their attention. You had their interest with the headline or whatever, but when you go deep and heavy and dense, you have their, and like it punched so much above your weight, and knowing that is possible has made it like my predominant obsession for like the past 6+ months. I'm trying to, I feel like I can do it
with your essays.
Yeah, I feel like I know that I'm capable of it. So I would say don't do that if you're just starting out and you haven't done it. Because you want to have the practice of, I'm sure like QC has mentioned parts of that tweet in conversation with people. People like, like you test it, you test it out, you try a bunch of stuff, and it's a bunch of work. So before you attempt like elaborate, complex jewels, like try and
and going back to the short video we just recorded, it's like part of the value of riffing things out in conversations with friends is like you can do it in a more rough form.
Yes.
And that's the nature of the medium of a conversation is that the rough stuff gets workshopped.
Oh man, there's a great moment in conversation with Michael Story a couple of days ago where we were sitting outside and he was like, I don't really know what I think about this yet, and if I tweet it, I'll probably get in trouble for it. I'm like, what is it? Let's jam it up. And he's like, this is the right audience for it. Like the people, like fellow creatives who understand what you're like, who don't judge you if you say something stupid, and you said like watching television is suffering. In that context, like again, if you tweeted that by itself on its own, it's gonna get some strange responses, or it might just fizzle out. Who knows? But like it's unpredictable. But that is the creative challenge, right? Like you have to think about how you want to present things and what kind of things you foresee, not.
So, how do we distill this video down to this conversation, down to like a couple sentences?
Well, okay, so we're talking about distillation.
Yeah.
So that's the. I feel like if you want to go down to sentences, you got to get to poetry at that point.
Yeah.
So it's like to distill. Oh man. I mean, okay, no, I'll bring myself. I'll try to go to a different question that I think is interesting, which is like I always just kind of go back. What was the most interesting thing about that whole thing, or what was the most surprising, or if you could only take away one thing? And so I wouldn't go with something I think about. I'll try and think about what I remember what you said, and I think there's something about. I'm actually going all the way back to the audience thing about the storytelling, and so when we're talking about when the storytellers each try and compress and expand and experiment with different phrasing, and then there's a moment in which the audience responds, right? And I think so like the media kind of maybe dismissively calls these like sound bites, like, oh, that's the sound bite that gets the reaction, right? Like in a YouTube video, it's like, oh, the most replayed, like, oh, that's the most, and it's a bit dismissive to kind of say, oh, that's the only important thing and everything is not. It's like, but like having a sense of sort of the emotional stakes or the context and the way people respond, that I think is the essence of memory even, right? So I have another phrase somewhere that's like, the trick to remembering lots of stuff, and is to piggyback the data onto like your emotional caravans. So you have these existing emotional caravans of whatever that's transporting all this stuff all the time. And if you can sneak in some data into, so once when Connor was asking, how do I remember? No, Tiago was asking, how do I remember email, calendar,
and you
D and T. and I can't remember the acronym. He wanted to remember the acronym, and I was like, oh, email Connor, which is his rival, dick pics, not tit pics. It's like, and that phrase has been seared into my brain forever. And everyone else is like, email your rival, like not this but that. Like it's just, it's funny, it's silly, it's kind of it's impolite.
But it's funny that you don't remember what the things stand for.
If I sat down for like 10 minutes, I'd probably get it. So it's email, calendars. What's D?
To do.
Delegation, something. Picks, not notes. T is something. To do is probably the last one. Figure it out. To do. Tasks. Yeah, I can reverse engineer it somewhat.
Wait, one thing that came to mind as you were talking about like the YouTube sort of most played thing is like that like. There could be a video medium that would be like a way more powerful, like choose your own adventure energy. And one of the ways that you could have that emerge fluidly is it's not top down plan choose your own adventure.
Right.
But like imagine that like you could go into your YouTube, be like, I want to make a video. Hey YouTube, show me some of the most played segments from my recent videos and I'll elaborate on them. And so then you go and you just make a longer video that's about that thing, right? So you do that unpacking, and then the YouTube video would have like a thing. Oh, here would be like completely crazy.
Okay.
This is probably a dumb idea, but there's something magical about it, which is there would be that video would be only unlockable if you replayed that section.
Interesting. It's like, wow, that's very video gamey, right? Like,
right? So it's like
a New Game Plus kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like you're now watching the thing. You're like, whoa, hang on, what was that? And you listen to it again, and it's like, do you want to go down the rabbit hole? It's like, whoa! Like, shit.
And then you know that everybody else in the comment section of that layer are only other like true fans.
Yeah.
Right? And for like small timers, that might seem kind of too much. But like if you're a large YouTuber with like a massive audience, like you want to know who like your serious viewers are so that you can reach them. That actually makes sense.
Yeah. And and then you get like video game walkthroughs that are like, like, I mean, there's two ways to do it. One is that like the video is unlisted, but there's a link that shows up when you do that.
Right.
And the other is like literally like you're logged into whatever, and you literally can't open it unless you've like watched the video and like I don't know.
Sure.
It's a little bit much.
Interesting premise.
It's important to like still have the thing have a URL and be linkable, even just for your own reference. But yeah, like, and this is also why like I've started doing a ton of writing in Google Docs and just sharing the Google Docs with people, and it's like, you can comment on them.
Yeah.
And I really want to see inline comments on blogs.
Yes.
I don't know why that's not a thing. Right. Medium sort of has it, but they're bad. But like technically it has it. I've been bugging Ollie at Memex, like Memex WorldBrain, to make a plugin for my blog that will integrate with his Memex so that people don't have to have the Memex extension and they can just comment on my blog inline anywhere.
Yeah. Doesn't Genius have a... Were they not trying to do something like that? Like, so Genius is a wrap.
Oh, were they trying to make it annotate sites and blog posts?
But
interesting.
I guess it's different.
Yeah. There's also like, I mean, Memex is built on Hypothesis, which is the highlighting library that they use.
Okay.
And they also have a browser extension plugin or whatever.
Right.
And they may have a thing that like lets you put it on your site and like let anybody comment in line, but I haven't fucked around with it too much.
I mean, I feel like, as a user and a writer, I feel like my favorite version of this would be like, you kind of mirror the blog on something else URLs. You know what I mean? So it's not really the
blog post still is sort of clean.
Yeah, and then there's like a wiki / the URL.
You know, that's actually an interesting, Okay, I just got an idea. It's like at the end of each of my blog posts, this would be annoying for a couple of reasons, but so it's not actually good. But like, put a link to a Google Doc version of the blog post that just has comments enabled or something. Or, there's a few.
Yeah, I have a link at the end of Introspect that's a link to a Google Docs, and it's like people just. So I think I put stuff like comment on. Like, so I put like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4 in the Google Doc. I'm like, if there's anything so basically user feedback, reader feedback, right? It's like hoping for like constructive criticism. Yeah. And people are just using it as like a thank you section. It's like, sweet. Not what I asked for, but sweet. But
the thing is though, unfortunately, it's like if I put the link at the end of the blog post, it's like you've read the whole blog post.
Right.
So you're not getting the person's first thoughts when they read that sentence. The sentence that hits them. Yeah. It's like, I've had people reading my reading some of my Google Docs, like highlight a sentence and be like, holy shit, I teared up when I read this. Right? You're not going to get people going back to find that sentence. Mostly,
you might,
a little bit, but not as much as when it's right.
You probably lose more than half of it.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And that's of the people who even click through, which is already going to be
and then
like
not
half. So, and even if they do, it's still not fresh. Right, so there is something about having the initial medium just already have inline comments. I think it's important.
I mean, it is amazing how I then find myself contextualizing by how people used to write letters to each other back and forth through I don't know whatever mail
like weeks.
2 weeks.
Well, I mean, it was actually remarkably quick if you lived in town. This is one of the things that we don't realize is that it used to be that in London you could send someone a letter and they could reply, and then you could send them another letter and they could reply all in one day.
Yeah, I get
that was like a thing that happened.
And
we just
cross country.
That slow, obviously cross country would take substantially longer, but within town, it's that was a rapid, relatively speaking, rapid medium of communication.
Yeah.
And it slowed way down when we didn't need that anymore. Phones showed up. It's now if you want a same day communication, just call a guy, right? Whatever. So the medium is the massage.
All right, shall we?
I think that's plenty.
Thanks for hanging out. Let us know your thoughts
in the inline comments, which we don't have. But you can make a comment that has a timestamp, but you'd have to go back and find it now if you're doing it based on me saying this, because here we are at the end of the video.
Well, some YouTube viewers are seasoned YouTube viewers. I got this guy, I can't remember his name, Costco Drift. Shout out Costco Drift. The guy's his thing. This is how my thing is tweeting. His thing is commenting on YouTube videos, and he writes essays full of comments, and they're pretty good.
Neat.
And so he includes that, and that's a service that people can provide, YouTube, just going around commenting on people's videos.
Yeah.
So I encourage that stuff, and people should comment on each other's. People don't seem to realize yet, and I think they will, that their friends' YouTube videos are places to hang out. So Tashin's video is so great. We could be having so many interesting conversations, time-stamped in Tashin's interviews with everybody. Yeah. And in Richard's as well. Yours, I don't know if you know any, but just all these interviews.
Yeah, there've been a couple little dialogues in my comments, but mostly just one-off.
And if we just get dozens of, maybe I'll organize something hey, let's go and watch this video and we'll just comment on it.
Yeah.
And everybody just.
And then that'll even just create an example of a flourishing comment scene.
Yeah. Oh my god. Okay, I'm going to do that. Yeah. I'll figure something out. Cool.
Yeah.
Or maybe we can just ask people to do it here. Since it's so meta, right?
I mean, I think doing it separately
is cooler. Yeah, I would rather do it as a gift to some other friend who's working on something.
That hits differently too.
True. Yeah. Yeah, that's my original plan anyway. Yeah.
Cool.
Like an interview about a specific topic, I think. Especially because then they've thought
and a fairly short video, so that it's not that hard for everybody to watch it. I think.
Yeah.
Maybe? I don't know.
20 minutes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
All right. Yeah. Cool. See you guys.